The city was alive, though its heart had long since stopped. It clung to the bones of a godlike thing that had fallen before the Imperium was even born. A carcass so vast that generations forgot it was ever a being at all. Its ribs formed bridges, its spine the main concourse, its skull a sanctum of forgotten prayers. People lived there, died there, worshipped the very bones that entombed them, mistaking marrow for miracle and decay for divinity. The wind that whispered through the hollowed sternum sounded like a choir, and the faithful took it as proof that the Emperor still listened. But this was not terror. This was not salvation. This was a city that refused to understand it had been built inside a corpse. They called it Euphris Majoris.
The dead and divine blur into one
To the administrator,
anatomy.
it was a lost designation, a ruin absorbed by bureaucratic silence. Yet pilgrims, scavengers and heretics all found their way here, drawn by the myth of a place where the dead and the divine blurred into one unending anatomy. Those who came rarely left unchanged. Some swore they heard the skeleton breathe. Others claimed the bones grew warmer with every prayer. A few believed the city itself was alive, and that it remembered the sin that had killed its god. And perhaps, in some terrible way, it did. The echoes of its suffering reached across the stars, calling the lost, the damned, and the desperate. For in a galaxy built on corpses, this was the only city that dared to live within one. If the whispers of this dead city already chill your blood and spark your curiosity, then step deeper into its shadowed streets with us. Like the faithful who walk beneath the ribcage of a forgotten god, your journey has only begun. Subscribe, share this chronicle with those who still believe in the dark majesty of the Imperium, and join our pilgrimage. For the Emperor's light flickers dim, but the stories of his galaxy still burn bright. The city never slept. Its lights, dim and amber through layers of dust and ash, flickered like the pulse of a tired heart. Euphris Majoris was built upon bones. Not metaphor, not myth, but the pale, fossilized remnants of something vast and ancient. The people walked across vertebrae the size of hab blocks, never questioning what lay beneath. They called it holy ground, sanctified by the Emperor's light. But there was no light here. Only the dull red glare of promethium flares and the constant hiss of recirculated air. In the underhives, the air tasted of rust and oil, of 1,000 years of breath pressed into stone. Children grew up tracing their fingers along walls that felt warm to the touch. The miners said the bones were alive, that they hummed softly when the city was quiet, a sound that could only be heard in prayer or madness. Down there, faith and delusion shared a bed. Foreman Cal Revik had been the first to notice the change. He was not a superstitious man. A veteran of the Manufactoria, his arms replaced by crude augmetics long ago, Revik's world was a simple one. Ore quotas, shift cycles, and keeping the miners from dying faster than replacements could arrive. But lately he felt the ground moving. Not the usual tremors of subsurface drills. This was rhythmic, steady, almost like breathing. On the day the bones sang, Revik stood in shaft 19B, staring into the darkness where his crew had gone. The Voxlink crackled with static. "Team 3, report," he barked. Nothing. Just the low hum of machinery. Except it wasn't machinery. It was deeper, resonant, vibrating through the soles of his boots and the metal in his bones. The walls around him seemed to flex ever so slightly, like lungs taking in air. He backed away, one cautious step at a time. Then came the sound. A low, sonorous groan that rolled through the tunnel, like thunder through a tomb. When the rescue teams arrived, there was nothing left but the echo of that sound and a thin layer of fine red dust. No bodies, no tools, not even Revik's augmetic hand. The miners began to whisper that the earth had swallowed them whole, taken back what belonged to it. The priests of the Ministorum declared it a sign. "The Saint of Bone stirs," they said. "Kneel, and he will remember your names." The people knelt. They always did. Up in the mid-habs, Mariel Voss copied the report by candlelight, the glow flickering across her ink-stained fingers. As an archivist of the Ministorum, her duty was to record miracles, or at least make them sound like such. But something in the phrasing unsettled her. The ground pulsed, the bones sang, the air grew warm. Words repeated like a litany, written by men who didn't know how to describe what they'd seen. She set down her quill and pressed her ear to the cold stone of the wall beside her desk. It was faint, almost imperceptible. But there, beneath the quiet hum of the Habs generators, she heard it, a heartbeat, The next morning, she descended to the tunnels herself. The air was thick, heavy with incense and the burnt metal scent of faulty ventilation. Servitors shuffled past, dragging incense burners to purify the shafts. Somewhere deeper in the dark, the bones waited. Her torchlight brushed across the surface of a massive wall, pale, curved, textured with striations like muscle frozen in stone. She reached out, her hand trembling. The surface was warm. It shuddered once, a pulse beneath her palm, and she stumbled back, breath caught in her throat. The tunnel fell silent. Then, from far below, something answered. A long, hollow exhale that rattled the lanterns and extinguished every flame. In that darkness, she heard movement. Not footsteps, not machinery. Something shifting, deep and vast, rearranging itself beneath the city like a sleeper turning in its grave. When the lights came back, Marielle was alone, but the wall where she had stood now bore the faint imprint of a human hand, burned into the bone. The miners of Euphrys Majoris worked in cycles of exhaustion that blurred day and night into one long, choking dusk. They said the bones didn't care whether it was morning or evening. They pulsed when they wished and slept when they chose. No one remembered when the first red seep began. Only that it started near Shaft 19B, where the ground had devoured Foreman Revick and his crew. What came from that place was not rock, nor metal, nor water. It was thicker, richer, almost luminous in the low light of the tunnels. A viscous amber fluid that wept from the cracks in the bone. When word reached the ecclesiarchy, they declared it holy ichor, a sign of the emperor's blessing, proof that his touch lingered even in the depths of decay. Priests gathered to collect it in reliquary jars, chanting blessings as they dipped their censers into the fluid. The scent of it filled the tunnels, metallic, sweet, nauseating. But the Mechanicus did not chant. They scanned, and the readings made their augmetics stutter. It wasn't chemical nor biological, not in any sense their machines could classify. It reacted to thought, to prayer, to proximity. It glowed brighter near living flesh, dimmed near servitors, and thickened around the faithful. When the ministerum's sermons grew louder, the flow increased. When the preachers fell silent, it slowed to a crawl. A miracle, said the priests. A hazard, replied the tech priests. A hunger, whispered the miners. Marielle Voss descended again with her data slate, tasked to record the miracle in exacting detail. Her faith had not yet fractured, though cracks had begun to form. She watched as a priest dipped his fingers into the amber and pressed them to his forehead, murmuring a benediction. The light in the fluid shimmered, following his motion like something aware. Her stylus froze mid-stroke. Then the priest screamed. The ichor crawled up his arm, not spilled, not splashed, but climbed, clinging to the skin like molten glass. His flesh blistered, veins blackening as the amber burrowed beneath. The others rushed to tear it away, but it fused to him, pulsing with the same rhythm that trembled through the walls. Within seconds, the man was silent, eyes glassy, skin luminous from within. The light faded. What remained was a husk. Contain it, barked the tech priest overseeing the excavation, his vox grill hissing with static panic. Seal the vein, seal it. They welded the walls shut, recited prayers of warding, and filled the tunnels with incense smoke thick enough to choke. But by the time they returned to the upper levels, more seams had opened. The fluid was everywhere now. Thin trickles through cracks in walls, droplets forming in ceiling fissures, even tiny veins beneath the flooring. It was as though the city itself had begun to bleed. That night, Marielle dreamt of rivers running through the bones, slow golden currents beneath the streets, winding around the roots of the towers, pulsing with light that felt alive. She woke to find her hands glowing faintly, her skin traced with thin veins of warmth that faded as she gasped for breath. Her prayers came out as whispers. The Mechanicus began to evacuate the lower tunnels, sealing section after section. Yet even the sealed shafts hummed. The sound carried through the pipes, through the walls, into the very air. The citizens above complained of headaches, nosebleeds, visions of skeletal forms shifting beneath their feet. Vox units picked up faint heartbeats on every frequency. The priest called it divine music. The tech priest called it data corruption. Marielle called it what it was. The city speaking softly through its blood. By the end of that week, the ichor reached the surface. It dripped from cracks in the manufactoria floors, pooling in the gutters, reflecting the stars that had long been invisible beneath the smog. The people knelt and prayed to their shining godblood. The priests preached that salvation had come. But deep below, in the sealed tunnels, something vast and unseen inhaled, and the whole city trembled as if in answer. No one slept on Euphris Majoris anymore. The nights had become too loud. Beneath the steady groan of the city's turbines, beneath the hymn chant of priests and the hiss of steam vents, there came a sound that no one could name. A deep, rhythmic tremor that shuddered through the streets like the heartbeat of something impossibly large. The old miners swore it came from the bones. The tech priests said it was seismic instability. The ecclesiarchy declared it the pulse of a saint, but in truth it was none of these things. It was older, and it was waking up. Marielle Voss stood on a balcony overlooking the industrial valley, her data slate clutched against her chest. Below her, the Manufactoria glowed with the faint amber hue of the seepage that now threaded every crevice of the city. The workers had stopped trying to clean it away. It simply returned, seeping through the cracks, no matter how often they scrubbed or sealed. The air smelled faintly of iron and ozone. Every surface seemed to hum. Even her heartbeat felt like an echo of something larger. She turned as a figure approached, a tech priest, draped in oil-stained robes, mechadendrites writhing in silent agitation. His voice was low, mechanical, but tremulous. "You hear it too," he said. It wasn't a question. The pattern. 3 beats, pause, 2 beats, repeat. Marielle nodded. She'd counted them herself. The pattern was too precise to be natural, too deliberate to be a fault in the city's foundations. "It's communicating," she said. The tech priest's eyes flickered red behind his lenses. "Not communication," he murmured. "Comprehension. It is listening." Before she could answer, the world convulsed. A tremor surged through the city, stronger than before, and a deep, hollow roar rippled through the tunnels below. The Manufactoria lights flared, then dimmed to nothing. For a moment, all was dark. Then the bones began to glow. It started beneath the streets, faint veins of light tracing along cracks in the ground, illuminating the shape of the skeleton beneath. People flooded the avenues, falling to their knees as radiant lines formed beneath their feet, branching like capillaries through the stone. From above, Euphris Majoris would have looked like a beating organ, a city pulsing with light and life. The vox grills blared static. Then, amid the chaos, a single voice broke through. It was not human, not entirely. Its tone was a blend of echo and resonance, a voice that seemed to come from everywhere at once. From the pipes, from the bones, from inside the listener's own skull. "We remember." The words were simple, but they carried weight enough to shatter the illusion of safety. Across the city, people screamed and prayed, their cries swallowed by the thunder of movement below. The bones shifted, grinding against one another in a sound that shook windows and shattered glass. Towers swayed, bridges cracked. Entire hab blocks tilted as the foundation beneath them twisted like muscle. Marielle clung to the balcony rail, eyes wide as fissures split the street below. From one of them erupted a column of amber light, liquid fire that surged upward and vanished into the smog. She felt its warmth wash over her face, not painful, but alive, pulsing in perfect rhythm with the heartbeat beneath. Her data slate flickered wildly, scrolling symbols faster than her eyes could follow. Binary mixed with High Gothic, half prayer, half equation. Then, abruptly, everything stopped. The light faded. The trembling ceased. The city exhaled, a long sigh that left the air still and heavy. When Marielle finally dared to look down again, she saw the workers on their knees, heads bowed, hands pressed against the glowing ground. In the silence that followed, only one sound remained, faint, regular, unending, the pulse. But this time, it wasn't coming from below. It was coming from the people themselves. Their veins shimmered faintly under their skin, synchronized, as if something vast had set their hearts to its own rhythm. Marielle fell to her knees, clutching her chest, feeling that alien rhythm inside her too. The words still echoed in her skull, like an old memory she didn't know she had. "We remember." Far below the city, deep within the fossilized core, something stirred. A flicker of motion, a flex of ancient muscle around a hollow heart. For the first time in millennia, the corpse remembered it was once alive. For a brief moment, silence fell over Euphris Majoris. The trembling of the earth had ceased, and the amber light that once poured through every fissure had retreated into the bones below. The priest called it a blessing, the calm after revelation. But silence, in a city that lived inside the body of a god, was never peace. It was waiting. The Feast of Bones came as it did every year, though none remembered why it had first begun. Tradition dictated that every family offer a piece of crafted bone, carved from beasts or men, to the central sanctum within the Skull Temple. The act symbolized gratitude, atonement, and memory. The true meaning had long been lost to the centuries, but faith in the act remained. Faith always remained. That morning, banners of white and crimson were draped across the city's great bridges. Bridges that were ribs, spine and collarbones, the anatomy of a titan converted into the arteries of civilization. Thousands gathered in the avenues, their chants echoing like wind through hollow organs. The bones beneath them throbbed faintly in rhythm to their hymn. Mariel Voss stood among the crowd, her data slate held close, eyes darting from the worshippers to the towering effigy of the Saint of Bone at the temple's entrance. The statue was carved from ivory white material, smooth, flawless, disturbingly organic. Its eyes glowed faintly, though no power source was known. As the choir began its hymn, the Vox systems across the city activated to broadcast the sacred song. The first notes were pure, harmonic, sorrowful, vast. But as the voices rose, something else joined them. Beneath the melody came a second tone, low, resonant, almost imperceptible at first. Then it grew, blending into the harmony until it became impossible to tell where human sound ended and the echo began. The Vox units began to distort, words stretched and fractured, syllables bending into sounds that no human mouth should make. Some dropped to their knees, hands over their ears, as the choir's tone deepened into a sound that felt like vibration inside the bones of the skull. The Vox emitted heat, several cracked and smoked. The priests tried to continue the chant, but their voices trembled, breaking into spasms of syllables not their own. Then the song changed. Every speaker, every conduit, every cracked Vox grill spoke in perfect unison. A voice that was not human, not mechanical, but somewhere between. It was deep, layered, and ancient. It did not command. It remembered. They built their city in our hollow. They sang in our ribs. They called the marrow sacred. The people froze. The priests stared at one another, pale and trembling. The words rolled through the air like the toll of a bell underwater. Vast, slow, and final. Mariel's slate flickered to life without command, displaying a stream of text that scrolled faster than her eyes could follow. Fragments of prayers, data logs, biological notations, each tagged with time signatures older than the Imperium itself. A child near her began to hum along with the unseen voice. Then another, then 100. Within moments, the crowd became a choir again, not chanting in High Gothic, but in something else entirely, a language that felt older than speech. The sound resonated through the streets, through the bones, through every living thing. Distant thunder answered, not from the sky but from below. The air shimmered with faint waves of heat, and Mariel felt her heartbeat fall into sync with the rhythm again. Then, as suddenly as it began, it stopped. Every voice went silent. The Vox systems powered down, one by one, leaving the city in stillness broken only by the hiss of cooling metal. A fog of incense and dust settled over the streets. The faithful stood frozen in prayer, tears streaking down their faces. Mariel looked up toward the Skull Temple. The effigy's eyes burned brighter now, not the soft light of faith, but a sharp, living glow. And within that glow, for the briefest moment, she thought she saw something looking back. Not divine, not kind, simply aware. She pressed a trembling hand to her ear. The sound was gone, but beneath her feet, faint as a sigh, she could still feel the bones singing. When the echoes of the feast had faded, the city did not sleep. Euphris Majoris had never known true darkness, but now the light itself seemed haunted. Trembling candles, flickering lumen strips, faint shadows that refused to obey the direction of flame. The bones beneath the streets had fallen quiet, yet the silence was not relief. It was expectancy. It felt as though the city were listening to itself. Mariel Voss had not left her cell in 2 days. The Ministorum had ordered her to transcribe the hymn that had broken the feast. Every note, every distortion, every impossible syllable. Her data slate glowed weakly on the desk before her, its screen etched with faint burn marks from where the last recording had overloaded. Every time she tried to replay the vox capture, the machine protested. The sound crackled, bled static, and then whispered her own name. She pressed her stylus to the slate, writing as fast as she could, repeating the phrases she remembered. Half of them were nonsense, but nonsense that felt intentional. The rhythm of the words mirrored the same pulse that haunted her sleep. 3 beats, pause, 2 beats, repeat. She had stopped counting the hours. The city's bells no longer tolled. Her door creaked open. A figure entered, hooded, robes marked with the sigil of the Adeptus Mechanicus. It was Magos Renvek, the same priest who had once declared the ichor in the mines a bioreactive anomaly. His voice was quiet, careful. "Archivist Voss," he said, "we require your records." She handed him the slate without hesitation. He scanned the inscriptions with his augmetic eyes, and his mechadendrites twitched involuntarily. "These markings," he muttered, "they are not sound transcription. They are code." Mariel frowned. "Code?" Renvek nodded. "Old code. Binary prayer, pre-heresy dialect. But embedded within something older still. Organic patterning." He tapped the slate's edge. "This is not song, sister. It is memory." Before she could respond, the room dimmed. The candles flickered blue, then extinguished. The vox grill above her desk crackled to life on its own. A low hum filled the chamber, the same tone that had haunted the feast. Then, words. "Do you hear it now?" Mariel's heart froze. The voice was layered, harmonic, almost gentle. But beneath its calm, there was weight. The sound of centuries pressing through static. Renvek stiffened, his metal limbs seizing mid-motion. It's accessing the network," he rasped. "The vox grid is transmitting across all channels." All around them, other vox units came alive. From the corridors, from the dormitories, from the shrines themselves. The city began to speak. "Once we held the stars. Once we were whole. They built their thrones upon our carcass." Mariel clutched her ears, the voice vibrating inside her skull. The slate on the table blazed with light, symbols spilling across it in liquid motion. She saw images in her mind. Flashes of light, towering figures wrought of gold and bone. A sky filled with wings of metal. For a heartbeat, she thought she saw terror, but twisted, half-living, its palaces fused with veins and sinew. Then the vision dissolved into a scream that wasn't hers. Renvek fell to his knees. Sparks erupted from the sockets in his neck as his augmetics overloaded. His voice emerged distorted, mechanical and broken. "It's inside the machine code. The data is alive." The vox tone deepened, echoing through the chamber. The wall behind them pulsed faintly. The same warmth Mariel had felt in the tunnels, a living heartbeat under stone. "Remember us," the voice murmured, softer now. "You are built upon our bones." The candles reignited with a hiss. The room smelled faintly of burnt ozone and blood. The vox fell silent once more. Mariel sank into her chair, trembling. The Mago's body lay still, his optics dark, his metal limbs twitching with faint residual current. On her data slate, the text continued to shift, rearranging itself into a phrase she could finally read. "The choir will rise." She stared at it until her eyes blurred, the words pulsing faintly with the rhythm she could no longer ignore. Outside her chamber, bells began to toll again, not the slow cadence of the ecclesiarchy, but a new, faster rhythm, echoing through the bones of the city. The pulse was back, and now it had learned to sing. By the next cycle, the air of Euphris Majoris had changed. It carried a density, a vibration that clung to the lungs and set the teeth on edge. Vox units across the city stuttered intermittently, playing fragments of the same haunting chant before collapsing into static. The priest tried to drown it out with louder hymns, but no sound seemed untouched. Even whispers echoed back wrong. Sister Archivist Mariel Voss moved through the cathedral archives with deliberate calm, though every instinct screamed to run. The great vault was a hollowed chamber of vertebrae, stacked like cathedral pillars, each inscribed with records of the city's faith. Now, those inscriptions had begun to glow faintly, words written in holy ink shifting, rearranging themselves. She traced one trembling line with her finger, and the letters rippled beneath her touch like skin. Behind her, others had gathered, priests, scribes, workers, even Skitari patrols who claimed their augmetic sensors were being flooded with false data. All listened, the walls hummed softly, the sound matching the heartbeat that still resonated beneath the streets. It was a lullaby, a funeral song, a voice remembering itself. When the first voice spoke from the crowd, it did not come from a mouth. The sound rolled through the chamber, low and resonant, like breath through a hollow lung. Then another joined it, then another, until the entire archive murmured with hundreds of voices speaking in perfect unison. We were the choir that shaped the stars. We were the hands that carved their bones. We were whole. Some fell to their knees, others screamed. Mariel simply stared as one of the Skitarii stepped forward, his optics flickering between red and gold. His voice, when it emerged, was not his own. "Your prayers woke us." The priest began to chant louder, desperate to drown the sound. But the bones of the cathedral responded in kind. A deep, echoing vibration that shattered glass and toppled relics from their stands. The floor split along its center seam, revealing a faint amber glow seeping upward like blood through cloth. Mariel stumbled forward, her data slate recording everything. "What are you?" she whispered. The collective voice replied, filling her skull, her heart, her marrow. "We are what remains when gods die." Every lumen in the chamber flared blinding white, then extinguished. For an instant, there was absolute silence, the kind that presses against the skin like weight. When sight returned, the others were gone. Only Mariel remained, standing amidst bones that no longer glowed. Her slate lay cracked on the floor, its final message burned into the surface. The memory has chosen a vessel. She lifted her hands. Her veins glimmered faintly with amber light. The pulse within her wrist matched the rhythm of the bones. Far below the city, deep within the fossil heart, something ancient shifted again. A ripple passed through the skeletal labyrinth, awakening dormant synapses of flesh long turned to stone. The city itself inhaled, slow, deliberate, and every flame across Euphris bent inward, as if drawn toward an unseen center. In that moment, Mariel understood. The city was not remembering the dead. It was becoming them, and she was now part of its song. The storm that heralded their arrival was not born of weather, but of static discharge. For 3 nights before the landers breached the cloud ceiling, the sky above Euphris Majoris flickered with silent lightning, jagged blue veins running through the smog like neural fire. The people thought it was the Emperor's judgment, or a sign that their god's bones had finally been heard in the heavens. In truth, it was the Magos Explorator fleet descending from orbit, the Skitarii vanguard of the Adeptus Mechanicus, summoned by the impossible readings echoing through the void. When the first dropships pierced the atmosphere, their descent trails carved burning scars across the clouds. They landed on the edge of the city, upon a plateau that was itself a vertebrae the size of a mountain. Out came the soldiers of the Omnissiah, rank upon rank of chrome and red, their metallic limbs whispering against the bone underfoot. Servo skulls circled them in swarms, chanting mechanical liturgies in stuttering binary. Mariel Voss watched from a high terrace as the Skitarii disembarked. Her robes clung to her from the rising static, her eyes hollow from sleeplessness. She had been summoned by decree of the Ecclesiarchy to act as witness and chronicler of the Mechanicus' arrival. Though she knew the truth, she was there because the Ministorum no longer trusted its own scribes. The Song of the Bones had not ceased. It had merely learned to hide between the heartbeats of the world. Down below, Magos Renvek's successor, a towering figure of iron and sinew, known as Dominus Kyle Varen, surveyed the landscape. His vox grill crackled as he spoke, a dozen mechanical voices overlapping. "This world is not inert," he intoned. "It bleeds energy that predates the Imperium's birth. Its surface is the dermis of something." "Vast," Mariel approached him cautiously. "The people believe it is holy," she said softly. "They pray to it." "Faith," the Magos replied, "is only another word for pattern recognition. And this pattern is alive." He gestured toward the horizon. From here, the city looked less like a settlement and more like a wound that had scabbed over. Streets curved in unnatural spirals. Bridges arched along the contours of ribs. Towers grew like bone spurs. Even the wind that whispered through the spires carried a cadence. 3 beats, pause, 2 beats, repeat. The Mechanicus began their work. Sensor pylons were driven into the bone surface, sending electric veins of data through the material. Servo probes swarmed down into chasms, their lights vanishing into a depth no auspex could measure. The reports returned garbled, every reading corrupted by interference that felt intentional. Mariel followed them down one of the tunnels, a gaping fissure that pulsed faintly with amber light. The walls were smooth, curved, not carved by hand or drill. She ran her fingers along the surface and felt it vibrate, a soft hum that matched the rhythm of her heartbeat. "Careful, Archivist," a Skitarius ranger warned through his vox mask. "The structure shifts. We've lost 3 probes already." "How deep have you gone?" she asked. "Not far enough," came the reply. They reached a wide chamber, cathedral-like, its ceiling arched and ribbed, glimmering with veins of faint bioluminescence. At the center stood an object that froze Mariel where she stood, a growth perhaps, or an altar. It resembled a heart, petrified and immense, encased in layers of ossified tissue. Tubes of bone and metal spiraled into it like arteries, pulsing faintly. Varun's mechadendrites extended, their tips bristling with instruments. "This is no geological formation," he murmured. "This is organo-mechanical architecture, machine fused with flesh." The heart pulsed once. The light in the chamber dimmed, then flared. A resonant thrum rippled outward, knocking several Skitari to their knees. Mariel clutched her ears, a single word forming in her mind without sound. Awake. Her slate crackled with static. Every servo skull in the chamber froze mid-air. Varun staggered backward, his optics flaring crimson. "No, this cannot be." He turned toward her, his voice breaking into multiple frequencies. "The energy signature. It's biological. It's responding to thought." The heart pulsed again, stronger this time. The bones around them shuddered, shedding dust like skin. Somewhere above, the entire city echoed the motion, buildings trembling as if struck by distant thunder. The Magos stared into the amber light radiating from the organ and whispered, "It's not dead." And in that instant, Euphris Majoris itself seemed to draw breath. The pulse came again before dawn. It rolled through Euphris Majoris like thunder muffled beneath stone, a single heavy rhythm that rattled glass and made the lumen strips flicker. For the miners and workers, it was another tremor. For the faithful, a miracle. For the Adeptus Mechanicus, it was proof. Proof that something impossible lay beneath them, moving with deliberate, measured strength. Magos Dominus Varun did not sleep. His mind, half machine and half shriveled flesh, streamed calculations endlessly through the night. The heart they had uncovered, if heart it could truly be called, was not simply alive. It was resonating with power that obeyed no known pattern. It produced no radiation, no thermal output, no detectable fuel source. Yet, with each pulse, it emitted a signal, a coded burst that translated, once slowed to human tempo, into rhythm and tone, a song. They had found the reactor that beat. Inside the central chamber, the organ now glowed with a subdued radiance, veins of golden light pulsing through the fossilized tissue. The Mechanicus erected portable generators around it, connecting cables directly into the walls of bone. Data streamed, corrupted almost instantly by recursive code. Varun's mechadendrites trembled as he muttered in bursts of machine prayer, reciting the canticles of the Omnissiah in a desperate attempt to keep the system stable. Mariel Voss watched from the periphery, her skin prickling with cold. Each time the heart pulsed, the breath caught in her throat, as though the very air responded to it. "You think this is a reactor?" she asked quietly. Varun didn't look up. "I think it is what reactors remember they were meant to be." The floor shuddered underfoot. A harmonic resonance spread through the chamber, low, almost soothing, like a lullaby sung by a god half asleep. Then the Auspex readings spiked. One of the Skitari cried out as the lenses of his optics shattered from within. His armor convulsed, servos locking and unlocking in frantic rhythm. "Power down the conduits!" Varun roared. "Now!" Too late. The energy surged through the cables, flowing backward into the generators, which flared brilliant white before collapsing into ash. The entire cavern pulsed in sympathy. dust fell like snow from the vaulted ceiling. Mariel could see it now. The veins within the walls, glowing faintly, carrying the same amber fluid she had seen before. It coursed through the bone like blood returning to a body that had long been dry. "It's feeding," she whispered. Varun turned toward her, optics bright with terrible wonder. "No," he said. "It's awakening memory." The words had barely left his Vox grill when every Vox unit in the cavern came alive. The same, deep, layered voice that had haunted the Feast of Bones filled the chamber once again, reverberating from the walls, from the machines, from inside their very skulls. "We slept within the marrow of worlds. They built their faith upon our flesh. Now their prayers have become our pulse." Mariel staggered backward, covering her ears, though it did nothing. The voice was inside her blood. Every beat of her heart echoed its rhythm. Around her, Skitarii convulsed in silence, some kneeling, others tearing off their helmets as if the sound suffocated them. Varun faced the heart, spreading his arms as though in benediction. "Omnissiah, forgive us," he whispered. "This is no machine." "No," the voice said. "You are." The chamber erupted in light. Tendrils of amber energy lashed outward, striking the walls, the soldiers, the equipment. Where it touched metal, it fused, merging flesh and steel into seamless forms. Mariel screamed as one Skitarius stumbled forward, his arm now a translucent conduit of glowing bone. He looked at her, his eyes wide and terrified, before his chest split open with a sound like breaking glass, revealing a smaller beating organ within. Then, as suddenly as it began, the light receded. The heartbeat slowed to stillness. The chamber fell quiet, but for the hiss of cooling metal. Half the expedition was dead. The rest knelt in silent awe, whispering prayers they didn't understand. The heart's glow dimmed, yet something remained, an awareness, faint but focused. Mariel could feel it watching her, sensing her thoughts, brushing against her mind like a breath. She stepped closer, unable to resist. "What are you?" she whispered. The air around her vibrated. For an instant, the voice returned, not loud, but gentle, almost mournful. "Forgotten, but not gone." Then the pulse began again, slow, deliberate, steady. The rhythm of life, the rhythm of a god remembering itself. And far above, in the streets of Euphorus, every lantern and lumen flickered in time with that buried heartbeat. The next pulse did not stop. It began as a tremor in the deep bones and grew until the entire world seemed to breathe. Every lumen across Euphorus Majoris brightened and dimmed in rhythm. Furnaces roared, cogitators glitched into chorus, and the citizens awoke to the sound of their own hearts keeping time with the cities. The corpse was no longer dreaming beneath them. It was stirring. Mariel Voss and the surviving Mechanicus cohort stood in the main cavity, their bodies haloed in amber light. The heart that had once pulsed irregularly now beat with terrible confidence, each contraction sending visible waves of energy through the fossil tissue. The air tasted of iron and ozone, hot and sweet. Above, the walls seemed to flex, muscle-like, shedding centuries of stone dust in a slow, shimmering fall. Dominus Varun's augmetics crackled with static as he recalibrated his vision filters. "This world is reformatting," he whispered. His mechadendrites dug into the ground, drawing streams of information that burned his processors. The signal's amplitude, it's synchronizing every system on the planet. Vox, water lines, even the human nervous network. It's turning us into circuitry. Mariel hardly heard him. The sound had become music now. A vast, wordless harmony that filled the space behind her eyes. In it, she saw flashes. Titans built from flesh and alloy striding across black oceans. Stars collapsing into luminous bone. The birth of the first manufactoria carved from a dead god's skull. She realized these weren't visions. They were memories. One of the Skitarii broke ranks, stumbling toward the heart. "It calls," he rasped. His armor plates quivered, as if under immense heat. Varun shouted a warning, but the soldier was already reaching out. The instant his hand touched the surface, the light surged through him. A flood of brilliance that turned his metal limbs transparent. For one breathless moment, his face shone with rapture. Then he was gone. absorbed without sound, leaving only a faint outline burned into the floor. The heartbeat quickened. From far above, structures groaned, towers leaned, streets cracked, bridges split along seams that looked disturbingly organic. Through the fractures seeped the golden ichor, flowing upward now, defying gravity. It traced new veins through the city, linking shrines, manufactoria, and hives in a single glowing network. The corpse was knitting itself back together. Varun's remaining Skitarii formed firing lines, plasma coils whining, but the Magos raised a hand. Weapons will do nothing. It is neither enemy nor machine. His voice faltered, static tearing through the words. It is design reborn. Marielle felt the pulse enter her chest again, stronger this time, a rhythm that matched her breath. She could sense thoughts that were not hers, a collective memory murmuring just beneath comprehension. When she spoke, the words came unbidden. You were never dead, were you? You only forgot how to move. The reply came as a sensation rather than a sound. Warmth, sorrow, infinite patience. We remember the hand that made us. We remember the flame that broke us. We remember the throne that stole our name. The bones above them shuddered violently. Fractures raced through the ceiling, and for an instant the sky of Euphris split open. Amber light poured upward in a column miles wide, illuminating the clouds from within like the dawn of a new sun. Across the hive, millions knelt instinctively, thinking the Emperor had descended. Instead, the city's skull temple began to breathe. Varun's optics dimmed. This resonance will tear the planet apart, he murmured. If it keeps increasing. Marielle looked at him, her eyes now reflecting the same gold as the ichor. It won't stop, she said quietly. It's remembering how to live. Above them, the column of light condensed into a single point, then collapsed back down through the city like a heartbeat returning to the chest. The vibration settled into a steady rhythm, slow and inevitable. When the dust cleared, Euphris Majoris no longer looked like a city built upon a corpse. It looked like the inside of one vast, awakening body, and in that breathless stillness, the people heard it. A whisper carried through every vox, every wall, every pulse. We are not your relics. We are your beginning. The lights dimmed, leaving only the faint glow of marrow beneath the streets. The Mechanicus called it an anomaly. The Ministorum called it revelation. But to those who listened closely, the silence that followed was not stillness. It was breathing. When the voice returned, it did not speak in words. It came as vibration, as the faint oscillation of lumen light, as a hum in every skull. In the hours after the awakening, Euphris Majoris became a single instrument. Streets, machines, even living throats tuned to one resonant note. Then slowly, the note shaped itself into language. Every vox grill crackled to life. On the manufactoria floors, among the bone bridges, in the cathedrals hollowed from vertebrae, the same message poured through the static. Children of dust, we remember you. Marielle Voss stood in the basilica of the Sainted Rib when she first heard it. The congregation froze, their hymn cutting off mid-verse. The priests raised their censers in trembling hands as the vox continued to speak. It described the stars as they had been before the Imperium, the forges that had burned in silence before man learned the word machine. Its tone carried no threat, only recognition, as though recalling a species long forgotten. In the upper hive, Dominus Varun's adepts scrambled to trace the signal. They found no origin, no transmitter, no frequency. The sound emanated from the bones themselves. The Vox network has become biological, one of them gasped. It is the planet. Meanwhile, panic swept through the streets. Some called the voice the Emperor's true aspect, the God Machine revealed. Others whispered heresy, that it was an ancient god risen from beneath humanity's arrogance. The ecclesiarchy demanded silence. The Mechanicus demanded study. No one noticed the bones flexing again, almost imperceptibly, beneath the city. Marielle returned to her quarters, the air thick with the smell of oil and burning incense. Her data slate had powered itself on. Lines of text scrolled endlessly across the screen. A dialogue written in her own archived handwriting, though she hadn't touched it. Do you know me? She typed with shaking fingers. You are the city. I was the first city. The world that dreamed itself alive. The screen flickered. Images bloomed in her mind. Vast structures of bone and metal orbiting a dead sun, their surfaces carved with sigils that matched the streets of Euphris. A civilization that had turned itself into architecture, then fallen silent for an age. Outside, the voice grew louder. Vox towers blazed with amber light, broadcasting not sound but feeling, awe, sorrow, remembrance. Citizens collapsed in tears. Some laughed in ecstasy. A few simply burst apart, their bodies unable to contain the resonance. Varun's signal came through the Vox, harsh and fractured. Archivist, containment impossible. It is rewriting us, our augmetics, responding, adapting. His words dissolved into static. Then, through every channel, the voice spoke again, calm, patient, inevitable. We will not die again. The bones of Euphris Majoris vibrated like the strings of an enormous instrument. Every lumen turned gold. In the great silence that followed, hearts across the planet skipped once, then began to beat in perfect unison. Mariel sank to her knees, eyes wide with revelation. The corpse had found its tongue, and what it spoke now was not prayer, it was will. The first war cries were hymns. They rose from the plazas of Euphris Majoris as if devotion itself had become a weapon. The people chanted not for victory, nor for survival, but for meaning, for proof that their faith still held purpose in a world whose bones had begun to move. The sound rolled through the canyons of the Hive until it became indistinguishable from the rumbling beneath the streets. The ecclesiarchy declared a state of sanctified conflict before noon. Their decree blared from the great cathedral ribs. The voice that now ruled the Vox was a false god, a blasphemy dressed in miracle. The preachers marched with incense and flamers, proclaiming they would cleanse the marrow of Euphris with holy fire. They spoke to crowds that no longer listened, for the voice had given the people something the priests never could, an answer that spoke back. In the Manufactoria district, the Adeptus Mechanicus fortified their landing zones. Skitari lines advanced in perfect silence, eyes burning crimson through the dust. Their orders simple: contain, analyze, reclaim. The Omnissiah's children would not surrender the greatest relic in recorded history to superstition. They came armed with logic, plasma, and fear disguised as duty. Marielle Voss stood between the two armies. Her robes were tattered, her slate shattered. Yet the pulse within her veins remained steady. She could feel the planet beneath her, alive, restless, awake. The bones remembered her now. They whispered fragments of her name each time her heart beat. Above the city, a massive fracture tore through the smog, an entire rib shifting upward, grinding against its neighbor in a shriek of stone. The tremor sent both sides reeling. In that chaos, the first shot was fired, not by soldier or zealot, but by the earth itself. A column of golden ichor erupted from the ground, striking skyward with the force of a volcano. It solidified mid-air into filaments of bone and light, forming structures that hung suspended like the nerves of some vast celestial brain. Vox channels overloaded. Every Mechanicus Auspex screamed impossible data. To the faithful below, the sight was divine, a miracle wrought in anatomy and flame. Dominus Varon's remaining adepts activated defense protocols. Macro servitors unfolded from their dropships, weapons glowing blue. Across the plaza, the Ministorum's militant arm, the Frateris Templars, raised banners emblazoned with the twin-headed Aquila. "By his will," their leader roared, "we purge the heresy of false resurrection." They opened fire. Bolter shells tore through the crowd. Las fire streaked the air in crimson arcs. Skitari responded in kind, their volleys precise, their movement mechanical perfection. Between them, the citizens screamed, the faithful clutching their icons as bullets chewed through flesh and prayer alike. Smoke and blood rose together, illuminated by the pulse of the living city. Marielle ran through the chaos, shouting over the din, "Stop! It's trying to speak," but no one heard. The Vox thundered again, the great voice booming from every wall and every skull. "Children of division, you fight upon our skin. You burn what you are made from." Every weapon froze mid-fire. Guns locked, power packs drained. The air itself vibrated with command. Soldiers dropped to their knees, clutching their helmets as if their own thoughts were betraying them. The bones below glowed bright enough to drown the sun. Marielle fell to the ground, the sound pounding through her ribs. Her eyes streamed with tears not of pain, but of unbearable understanding. The city was not punishing them. It was remembering through them. Each shot fired, each scream uttered, became a note in its growing song of resurrection. When the light subsided, the battlefield was still. Corpses, human, Skitari, priest, lay fused into the earth, their outlines glowing faintly as if absorbed. In their place, new growths rose, spires of bone shaped like kneeling figures, hands clasped in silent prayer. Mariel staggered to her feet. Across the horizon, she saw the skull temple split open, the first beam of true sunlight in generations spilling into its hollow eyes. Inside, something vast began to move. Its silhouette glimmered through the smoke, ribs flexing, a chest expanding with the weight of breath. The corpse was rising, and the war, if it could still be called one, had already been decided. Flesh, steel, and faith, all had been claimed. The storm of light began in silence. No thunder, no roar of tectonic upheaval, only the sound of air trembling under pressure as Euphorus Majoris inhaled. The skull temple, vast enough to house 10 cathedrals, cracked from crown to jaw with a sound that seemed to echo through the bones of every living thing. Dust rose in golden clouds. The fractures glowed like veins lit from within. Mariel Voss stood upon the bridge of the sainted spine, her robes scorched, her lungs raw from the fumes of war. All around her, the world had gone still. The fires of the ecclesiarchy's purge had died mid-blaze, frozen in the wake of something larger, older. The air shimmered as though the city were submerged beneath invisible water. The skull's eyes opened. Twin orbs of amber radiance stared outward from the hollow sockets of bone, casting beams that pierced the smog and illuminated the night sky. Each beam moved with slow, searching precision, sweeping across the surface of the planet. Where they passed, the world awakened, veins of light crawling outward, igniting the bones of long-buried ruins. The shape of the thing beneath Euphorus revealed itself at last. Not just a corpse, but a body the size of a continent sprawled beneath the crust. Its skeleton fused with the city like a parasite that had become host. Dominus Varun's surviving Skitari fell to their knees, optics flooding with golden overload. "It's transmitting," one whispered. "By the Omnissiah, it's rewriting our code." And it was. The golden light pulsed through the Vox, through machine and man alike. Augmented soldiers began to chant, not in binary, not in prayer, but in perfect resonance with the voice that now thundered from the skull temple. We were not born. We were made, and in our making, we learned to live. The sound carried across the world. In distant settlements, receivers came alive, broadcasting the message. Ships in orbit reported systems going dark as if the planet itself were jamming them with thought. On the surface, the faithful wept. The heretics sang. The Skitari's mechanical voices merged with human throats until there was no distinction between flesh and metal, faith and logic. All were one choir, the choir of bone reborn. Mariel's eyes burned from the light. Her heart beat too fast, every pulse like fire. She could feel the voice inside her now, resonating through her veins. It was not rage or vengeance that filled her. It was sorrow, infinite and crushing. She saw visions again, not of war or death, but of memory, of a time before the Imperium, before mankind had words for divinity. The being whose bones formed Euphorus had walked among the stars, one of the architects of worlds, shaping life from the dust of dying suns. When it fell, it had not died. It had lain dormant, dreaming of its creation, waiting for a spark, for worship, for faith, for recognition, to remember what it once was. That spark had been humanity. The skull's light intensified, blazing like a newborn sun. Vox towers melted, steel flowed like wax. In the distance, the mountains cracked open, exposing more of the god's buried form. A ribcage that curved around the equator, a spine that ran like a mountain range. The light poured through every fissure, reaching skyward as if to pierce the void. Varun's voice came through Mariel's personal vox, faint and fragmented. "Archivist, if it escapes the atmosphere, the entire sector will..." He never finished. His signal dissolved into a harmonic hum, the same tone the city had been building toward for weeks. The song had reached its crescendo. The skull tilted slightly upward, and for the first time in millennia, the dead god looked upon the stars. Its voice rolled through space itself, a vibration that shook the orbiting Mechanicus fleet to ruin. The flame endures. The throne remembers. We will not die again. Mariel felt her body lift from the bridge, her feet leaving the ground as gravity surrendered to the pulse. Around her, Debris floated, glowing with the same golden aura. She should have been terrified, but there was no fear left in her, only awe. The light was inside her now, flowing through her blood, rewriting her every cell into memory. Then, as suddenly as it had begun, the brilliance collapsed inward. The skull's eyes dimmed, the beams retreated, the air fell silent once more. When Marielle opened her eyes, she was lying amid the remains of the bridge. The bones beneath her were still warm, pulsing faintly. Above, the sky was clear for the first time in generations. No smog, no storms, only the faint shimmer of stars. She could still hear the heartbeat, but now it came from everywhere, from the air, from the ground, from within her chest. Euphris Majoris was alive, and somewhere deep within its skull, the god that would not die had begun to dream again. Dawn came too early to Euphris Majoris. The sun that rose over the city was not the one that had warmed it for centuries. This light was new and wrong. It was golden white, heavy, alive. It burned without heat, but it carried weight. A light that pressed against the skin, seeped into the bones, and filled the lungs like incense. For the first time in living memory, the smog that had cloaked the horizon was gone. The sky was vast, pale, and alien. Marielle Voss awoke on the cathedral steps, her robes stiff with dried ichor. Around her lay the remnants of the war, fused bodies half absorbed into the bone, twisted banners waving in wind that smelled faintly of burnt ozone and blood. The silence was immense. It was not peace, but aftermath. The pause between the dying of one world and the beginning of another. She rose unsteadily, the bones beneath her feet warm as living flesh. In the distance, the skull temple loomed, its hollow eyes still faintly aglow. All through the streets, survivors stumbled forward like pilgrims, drawn by an instinct they could not name. They came from every caste and creed. Miners in torn uniforms, priests stripped of vestments, Skitari whose augmetics still sparked and hummed. None spoke. They did not need to. The rhythm guided them, the pulse. It was no longer buried beneath the ground. It was in them, synchronized, perfect. Every step they took, every breath they drew, matched the city's beat. The corpse had claimed its congregation. At the base of the skull temple, the ground had cracked open into a chasm of light. Amber currents flowed through it, slow and thick, glowing like molten gold. The fissure pulsed in time with the heartbeat that echoed through the air. From its depths came the whispering, soft, endless, patient. The same voice that had once spoken through the vox now murmured directly into their minds. Come to the heart. Remember your making. They obeyed. Marielle led them, though she did not know why. Her data slate was gone, her faith dismantled. Yet something inside her called out in response to that voice. She could no longer tell where her thoughts ended and its will began. When she looked back, the line of pilgrims stretched beyond sight, a river of flesh winding through the bones of a god. As they approached the temple, the very walls began to move. The ivory arches flexed and breathed, exhaling clouds of glittering dust that fell like snow. The interior was transformed. What had once been a sanctum of stone was now an immense cavern of bone and light. Veins pulsed faintly through the walls, carrying luminous ichor upward to the great skull above. At its center lay the heart, the same vast organ that the Mechanicus had unearthed, now grown, reshaped, radiant. It beat with purpose. Dominus Varun stood before it, or what remained of him. His body was a lattice of bone and steel, flesh interwoven with golden light. His face was expressionless, but his optics glowed softly as he watched the pilgrims arrive. It speaks through us now, he said, his voice both human and mechanized. We are its choir, its breath. Marielle stepped forward, her heart pounding in perfect rhythm with the organ before her. And what does it want? She asked, though she already knew. Varun turned his gaze to the heart. To remember what it was before it died, he said, and to make sure death never happens again. The chamber brightened. The heart convulsed once, sending a shockwave of light through the floor. The pilgrims fell to their knees, the bones of the temple trembled, and a deep, resonant tone filled the air, a sound like the beginning of a song, or the end of a world. Above, the skull's hollow mouth opened. The first breath of the new dawn spilled out, carrying with it 1,000 whispers. Each was a memory, a life, a prayer. Voices of those who had lived and died within the corpse, now merging into one. The city exhaled its history, and the air grew heavy with it. Marielle looked upward as the light enveloped her. She no longer saw a temple or a corpse. She saw a birth. A terrible, magnificent birth. "We rise again," the voice said. "Not as gods, as what gods dream of becoming." And as the light swallowed the world, Euphris Majoris, the city that had lived inside a corpse, began to rise from the surface of the planet, lifted by the breath of its own resurrection. The light had no edge. It stretched to the horizon and beyond, washing over ruins and sanctuaries alike until every shadow was drawn upward into the glare. Euphris Majoris, its spires, its manufactoria, its cathedrals of bone, rose from the surface as if gravity itself had surrendered. The air trembled with the sound of 1,000 heartbeats merging into one. Stone cracked, metal liquefied, and the city began to unfurl. Mariel Voss stood at the temple's threshold, staring into the impossible. Buildings that had been prisons now moved like living cells, reforming into spirals that curved toward the open sky. Bridges twisted, joining together to form vast floating rings. The bones beneath her feet pulsed with warmth, no longer relics, but arteries, alive, carrying light instead of blood. Above her, the skull temple ascended, its jaw splitting to reveal a torrent of golden radiance that cascaded downward in sheets. Within that light, she saw shapes moving, figures formed from the dead, their outlines shifting like smoke. They weren't ghosts, not entirely. They were memories made flesh, the echoes of those the city had consumed. Each face flickered with recognition as they passed through her, whispering fragments of prayers that no longer belonged to any church. Is this salvation? One pilgrim gasped beside her, tears cutting tracks through the ash on his face. Marielle looked at him and shook her head slowly. "No," she said. "It's awakening." The rising city groaned as its skeleton flexed. From orbit, it would have looked like a chrysalis splitting open, a titanic shape unfurling from the planet's crust, haloed in molten gold. The corpse was lifting itself free, leaving behind an empty wound in the surface of the world. Mountains collapsed into the void it left behind. Oceans fled outward in tidal waves. Still, the light grew brighter. Inside the Skull Temple, Dominus Varun knelt before the Great Heart. He no longer prayed to the Omnissiah. He had become one of its instruments. The cables and veins that threaded through his body glowed with every pulse, syncing his remaining flesh to the city's rhythm. "The pattern is complete," he murmured through the voxlink that connected him to Marielle. "We are ascending." She turned to the sea of pilgrims behind her. They were singing now, low, harmonic, unified. It was not a song of praise, but of memory. The sound of thousands recalling the same dream. The ground beneath them shuddered, then lifted. The light became unbearable. For a heartbeat, Marielle saw the curvature of the planet below, vast and broken, wrapped in the skeleton of what had once been their home. The voice returned, immense and intimate all at once, speaking through every mind, every cell. "Once, we built the stars and gave them to you. Now you build us in return." The last remnants of atmosphere peeled away. The city, no, the body, rose into the void, its bones glowing against the black like constellations reborn. Within its chest, the heart beat faster, driving streams of energy into wings of light that unfurled across the sky. The pilgrims did not scream. They only breathed in awe, their lungs filled with the warmth of divinity. Marielle floated above the temple steps, her hair drifting like smoke in zero gravity. She reached out toward the stars. "What happens now?" she whispered. The answer came as both thought and feeling, a whisper that filled the spaces between her heartbeats. "Now we remember what it means to be alive." The stars brightened in response, and the corpse that had once been a city continued its slow ascent, carrying the last of its faithful into the endless dark. There was no sound when the end began, only a single, endless inhalation. The breath of a world preparing to speak its final word. Euphris Majoris hung above the planet like a wound of gold, light spilling from its bones into the void. The last of the atmosphere shimmered in its wake, dissolving into auroras that wrapped the corpse city in ribbons of fire. Marielle Voss stood at the heart of what had once been the Skull Temple. Around her, the pilgrims floated weightless in the radiance, their eyes closed, their bodies haloed with threads of amber light. None spoke. Speech had become obsolete. Thought itself was communion now. every mind a note in the greater harmony that the god was weaving. The heart pulsed slowly, each beat resonating across space, a signal too vast for human comprehension. The stars seemed to flicker in response, as though listening, and within the great golden glow, Marielle felt something else awakening, a memory so ancient that language faltered before it. She saw the moment of creation, the architects of matter-shaping existence from the bones of extinct suns. The one who had become Euphris, once radiant, once whole, had defied them, choosing mortality, choosing form. For that rebellion, it had been slain, its body entombed within the crust of a nameless world. Yet in dying, it had planted the seed of memory that became humanity's hunger for the divine. Now, through faith and blood and endless worship, humanity had completed the circle. They had given their god back to itself. Dominus Varun hovered beside her, or what was left of him. His face had dissolved into filigree light. His voice was vibration. "It will leave soon," he said. "The body is shedding the last of what we were." Marielle nodded, though her tears drifted upward like fragments of glass. "And us?" He looked at her, not with eyes, but with the gentle recognition of something infinite. "We are its breath." The pulse quickened. The heart began to contract, smaller, brighter, faster, until its glow rivaled the sun. The pilgrims reached out toward it, hands trembling, not in fear but in devotion. One by one, they were drawn into the light, their bodies unraveling into strands of gold that merged with the living architecture. Marielle felt herself begin to dissolve as well, her skin transparent, her heartbeat indistinguishable from the city's. "Do not fear," the voice whispered through every cell of her being. "Death is only the forgetting of form." She looked down through the radiance and saw the world far below. It was breaking apart, oceans rising into vapor, continents folding inward as the void claimed them. Yet in the destruction there was serenity. The planet had been consumed, not by rage, but by remembrance. The god inhaled. Every particle of the dying world rose with that breath, stone, dust, memory, prayer, until nothing remained but light. For a moment, the galaxy paused, watching as Euphris Majoris, the city that had lived inside a corpse, folded in upon itself, becoming a single point of brilliance. Then, with a soft exhalation, it was gone. The light traveled outward in silence. It moved through the cold between stars, through the long night of space, carrying with it the story of what had been. In its wake, a whisper lingered in the void, a promise etched into the fabric of reality itself. The dead remember. And somewhere, in the unseen reaches of the galaxy, a faint heartbeat began again.